little story time for this video. Some of you may already know this. In my background, I used to be a SEER specialist. And SEER stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. For the military, what we do is train individuals that are identified as high risk of isolation. Isolation can mean away from their unit, out in the middle of nowhere, having to survive. Isolation can mean becoming a prisoner of war, hostage, several different things. But largely, they're away from their mission and they have to be able to survive whatever circumstance and get back into friendly hands. Well, when we would bring people through a course to train them on these skills, it was pretty long. It was like a 19-day course to give people just kind of the fundamental skills. We would introduce varying levels of stress. We would give them the fundamentals of how to survive various circumstances, whether that be evasive circumstances or just typical survival out in the middle of the woods, say. But we would walk them through all kinds of different circumstances so that they could practice it and actually build some of those skill sets so that if it happened in real life, it wouldn't be the first time that they were trying to do whatever it is that they had to do. So what we would do with this is walk them through this course. We'd start in the classroom. They'd get presentations and briefings. Then we'd get some basic hands-on experience before we would go into this field phase and walk them through an entire practical exercise and demonstration type instruction so that, again, they can get some of that practice. Well, we had these kinds of books that we built for ourselves, and everything that we did had to have consistent instruction. It's called an instructor guide. These instructor guides would facilitate how I would teach the material, how my counterparts would teach the material, so that every pilot or every individual that is going through this training gets a consistent training across the board. One of those things that we would teach is called Evasion. And I want to talk about how Evasion actually has some practical applications or maybe a couple nuggets you might be able to use and how we train individuals for responding to what we now call an active assailant. So in this book, one of the lessons we had was entirely dedicated to evasion, and they break it down into a process. So an evasion situation begins when you become isolated and you determine, or somebody is after you, you're in an environment where you have to get away because if you don't, you're going to get captured and whatever else is going to happen. So we would teach people on these techniques on how to evade, what you would need to do to get yourself back into friendly hands in some sort of non-permissive environment. In other words, some sort of environment where there's probably some kind of a conflict going on. We're not really supposed to be there. And it breaks down into 5 phases, but I want to illustrate what these are and how we would teach these a little bit and give you a couple insights in how you can talk through a process like this, not necessarily this process specifically, but understanding that you can give process to help individuals have a better framework beyond run, hide, fight, and how they apply that skill set through a progression of actions. So in here, we've got several different ones. We've got immediate action, we've got initial movement, you've got hole up, you've got evasive movement, and then you've got recovery. So I'm just going to write these down fast. So you've got immediate action. Forgive my chicken scratch here. Never claimed to be Bob Ross. Immediate action. You've got initial movement. You've got hole up. You have evasive movement. And then you have recovery. You're probably already seeing some of these parallels. So this is the 5 phases of evasion. I'm going to set the marker down here for a second, but this is what we would teach people, how to go through this process ultimately to achieve recovery. Because as a country, we have a commitment that we want to get everybody back. We want everybody to get back into friendly hands that are going out there and putting their lives in danger. But you can kind of see the parallels here. Let's say in a workplace or in a public venue, whatever the circumstance is, when shots are fired, when violence erupts, maybe it's unrest, maybe it's somebody attacking with a knife, whatever the situation is, you have some immediate actions that you want to take. And this is valuable from the perspective of it's not simply run, hide, fight. There's an assessment that we need to go through to identify what is the best option between run, hide, fight that we should choose as individuals in the middle of the circumstance. Does this happen over the long period of time? No, of course not. This might be the period of a couple seconds, maybe a second for you to decide, here's my circumstances, and then you're off to the races. But here's just a couple examples. So what we would teach people is they needed to look at their medical condition. They need to observe their immediate area, keep a low profile. We would talk them through how they can identify enemy presence, where that enemy presence is, how far away, and giving themselves that immediate circumstantial understanding of what the environment is dictating. Now, if you haven't thought about this kind of thing ahead of time, and this is part of the value of this, is thinking about these things ahead of time, then you may not know, or you might be stuck for a little while and it'll feel a little panicky until you get some sort of framework going of how you navigate this procedure. So you do those immediate actions. This would apply to an active assailant situation. Like once you hear shots fired, say, you need to take that immediate action. Where did it come from? What are the circumstances? What's my best route of exit or evacuation? And then you go through the process from there. And this is a constant process. That assessment is a constant process you're continually doing throughout the time to identify what is the best course of action for you to get to survival and recovery from the situation. The second one on here, initial movement. So based upon the circumstances, once you identify where you need to go or what your best option is, then you make that initial movement. It's enough in this case, when we were teaching evasion, we would give people, we want to get enough of a movement going so that we can buy ourselves some time, reassess the situation, and then identify what's going to be the next course of action to get us towards longer opportunity for survival, longer opportunity for successful evasion, whatever that looks like. And then the ultimate goal is these next three action items. Maybe we have to find a hide site, or we have to hole up, give ourselves a little bit of a hiding place to rest. When you're in a survival situation, you have limited resources. Your body's going to be taxed. You're under significant amounts of stress. So having a hide site that you can get into can allow you to rest, gather your thoughts, make a plan, do those sorts of things. So we'd walk through this process, then you go from there to evasive movement. Now this is going to be maybe a progressive thing. Maybe we do some hide site, maybe we do some evasive movement, ultimately trying to get ourselves to a place we can get recovered, a place where we can be safe, or a place that we can get ourselves back into friendly hands. So applying this to the active assailant kind of considerations, it's a similar thing. This is kind of that back and forth of the run, hide, fight. Maybe some of your movement is slow and methodical. Maybe you have to hide for 2 minutes to give yourself enough freedom to move back into an evacuation or a movement phase to get yourself towards freedom. Because what we know is ultimately there's no replacement for being as far away from the threat as possible. So if your continuing progression is to get yourself further and further away from the threat, that's ultimately what we're trying to do. But the circumstance is going to dictate. So when we are teaching people or we're thinking about this, if you're an individual thinking about how you would respond, put it into a process, identify what's my immediate action, run, hide, fight, and then how might you go between that course of action towards survival. What does barricading look like if you're in a building? What does hiding look like if you're in a park? What does hiding look like if you're in a parking garage? The circumstances are going to dictate how you choose to prioritize your survival in that kind of circumstance. It is incumbent upon us as individuals that are in that kind of an event to decide what does survival look like. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you're teaching others, you can also walk this out, help people do individual schemas and walk through this in a process kind of oriented discussion so that then we can increasingly build towards maybe doing exercises or something that's a little bit more practical, hands-on kind of training to build our resilience for this kind of an issue. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video, got a couple nuggets out of it, but if you have questions, want to get more content like this, subscribe to our channel, put comments wherever comments go, like and do all the things. You can visit our website at cpps.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and until next time, cheers.